It's life. You can go, brother.
Welcome to Bethera Spiritual Healing, a nonprofit organization where all faiths and beliefs are welcome. We begin every Sunday meeting with a prayer, and to lead us in that prayer today is our sister Regina.
Wow. Okay, let us close our eyes. And as we close our eyes, let us think of the divine Heavenly Father. And as we say good morning to our Heavenly Father, let us also say good morning to our heavenly beings that surround us with their love and guidance. Our mentors, the physical doctors, our loved ones.
Yeah.
And let us thank God for this blessed opportunity to be together today. As we open our hearts and our minds to the lesson that we have before us, and let us give thanks for our speaker. And we ask you, Heavenly Father, to bless us in this moment with your love and your grace, and with the opening of our service today. So be it.
Thank you, Regina.
Mm-hmm.
We are taught that we progress with the two wings of knowledge and love, or charity. And we begin today's meeting with two parts. The first one is an educational presentation, and the second part is a healing process. Throughout the week, BSH has a variety of different activities. Every evening at 6 o'clock, we have a prayer service. Any and all are welcome to join in a corporate prayer for whatever purposes there are, individual or collective. At 6:30 in the evening, we begin on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, educational session. And I'm doing this all from memory for those of you who routinely hear this. The schedule is on the BSH website, bshcenter.org. We are in the midst of 3 different books and 2 different spiritual messages. So at 6:30 each evening, you are free to join us. On Monday nights in particular, after that initial session on mediumship that is educational in nature, we then do a closed session for the BSH mediums only. On Wednesdays, we make ourselves available for any individual one-on-one needs that our members or visitors may have at any time. If you have such a desire, contact us through the chat session here or through the website, and someone will get with you. I don't think I missed anything. Okay. Today, our presentation is from our sister, Teresa Castro. She has asked her bio not be read. Let me just say that I met her online in one of the many activities she was involved in years ago, and she's joined BSH as an active contributor, and always is challenging us and contributing to our progress. So I'm going to turn this over to Teresa.
Thank you so much, Mark. Beautiful opening, beautiful prayer. So today we're going to continue with our studies in the Spirit Book, looking at the Spirit Book questions. And so let me share my screen and we can start doing that. So this is just a little bit review before we get started. We've already looked at these questions in a previous class. And mainly what I want to bring out by presenting these three questions. Well, it's one question, 134, but it's broken down into three parts, and is for us just to understand going into these questions that at least in regards to this chapter, we're going to consider the word soul and spirit as synonymous. We understand that the soul is an incarnated spirit. But for this study, we're going to see that as soul and spirit as being one and the same. It can get very confusing. Some people talk about big S spirit, little s spirit, but for this presentation, we're looking at soul and spirit as one and the same. So the chapter is the separation of the soul from the body. So we can also see this as the separation of the spirit from the body. And again, these questions are taken from the Spirit Book. That's the study we're doing this year. We started at the new year. And we're looking at questions 154 to 162. So what I want to do, I've tried to do anyway, there is kind of follow the format, if we can call it that, of this book. It is entitled The Spirit's Book, and it's a study aid. And this was put out by Sergio, let me say his name, Schickler. And he's a Brazilian, and I believe, I might be wrong about that. But anyway, he put this together as a study guide. And so it's a book filled with all of the Spirit Book questions, but there's no answers. So he intended for it to be used in study groups where you would see the question, but there would be no answer on the page. And so just to kind of get, us using our discernment and our reasoning and what we already know about Spiritism to see if we can, kind of to challenge us a little bit. Like, what do I really understand? What do I know? And work together in groups. Anyway, it's interesting. There is a website, spiritismstudy.org. If I haven't looked at it, it might be interesting to see the outcomes of using that book. He was doing kind of like a survey of groups using it and what they were getting out of it. So in doing so, we're going to look at this question: is the separation of the soul from the body a painful process? And, when we first look at this question, it looks like a yes, no, right? Pretty black or white. So how many of us would say yes? How many of us would say no? But we know in Spiritism, there's that classical Angie from Florida response: it depends. And Kardec, in his note, he kind of helps us to understand a little bit so we can better discern what this question is about. So he makes it clear that natural death is being spoken about here, the depletion of organic vitality due to age. So now we can ask the question: is the separation of the soul from the body during natural death a painful process? So what do people think? Yes, no? Nobody has any thoughts. Okay. This is it.
No.
No?
It is
I
not.
actually think it's a combination, depending on, yes. Because my mom, when she passed, it was like a 3-day process.
Yes. So that does, well, anyway, so he's asking, is it a painful process? There's definitely a process. And the Spirit answers are no. Frequently, the body suffers more during life than at the moment of death. The soul itself feels nothing at death. The suffering that is sometimes experienced at the moment of death is pleasure for the spirit, for it sees that the end of its exile is at hand. So we need to, it's kind of reminding us, this is death of the body, right? Spiritist principle, immortality of the soul. So our spirit does not die. All right, so next, how does the separation of the soul from the body occur? And whether you're on mute or not, we should all be chiming in molecule by molecule, right? Does that sound familiar? Actually, they answer by saying, once the bonds that held the soul are ruptured, it disengages itself. So 155b, does the separation of the soul from the body occur instantly and through an abrupt transition? So again, Kardec kind of comes to our rescue with his footnotes and helps us to understand that, remember, death is destruction of the body, that our perispirit, our spirit, connects the spirit to the body during the corporeal life, and it's going to separate from the body when organic life ceases. In other words, death. And then he goes on to kind of help us understand, to break this down a little bit more, of this thing about being instant and abrupt. And he said that the speed, the perispirit, this is Kardec's footnote still, the perispirit varies, its disengagement from the body varies in speed according to the individual. So he says, when there's like instantaneous, not an instantaneous death, but the disengagement is initiated by intellectual, moral activity and elevated thoughts during corporeal life. So he's talking about, and when the disengagement is relatively easy, and it seems to kind of just, happen very nicely and without too much discomfort, and perhaps with purified, elevated spirits, no discomfort at all. And then he says, when it takes a few hours, that's still considered quick, and death can be a liberation where the spirit actually has a sense of being freed. But he also says, when it takes longer, days, weeks, months, and even years, then most often that's when their corporeal life had been kind of materialistic, sensual, and they just mean very attached to our senses. So very connected to the physical body. So it takes a lot longer for that to disengage. And so when he talks about affinity, he says affinity, and it's dependent on material importance. So the affinity is occurring between the perispirit and the body. So the more material we are attached or connected, the more affinity that there is. And so it says that those bonds are more, take longer, require more effort to unravel. And then he wants to be sure that we understand, even though it can take, like we're talking about here, days, weeks, months, even years, he just wants us to remember that this doesn't mean the physical body can be resurrected and brought back to life just because the spirit is still attached. So just to be clear on that, because, one could maybe misinterpret that as, oh, so maybe there's still a chance that they could be saved. They could be revived or something. And no, that's not what it means. It's the spirit still attached to material senses, maybe their belief system, how they live their life. They were not concerned with the spiritual life. And we saw this as an example in the No Solar book with Andre Louise, when he first arrives in the umbral, or the lower zones. He's very attached to his life as a doctor and, very much attached to his body and the senses. And it's not till after a while that he suffers, then he starts to realize and remember that he's a child of God. And he's able to go on. All right. So with that in mind, the spirits answer this question. And they say that no, the soul liberates itself gradually. It does not escape like a captive bird that is suddenly set free. And I just wanted to open it up if anybody wanted to make some comment. Oh, one other thing I will add here. So Kardec starts to tell us at this point in this footnote that, this longer duration of the perispirit to unravel and disengage from the body can be a quite painful period. And he gives the example of suicides and murders, disasters, that this can happen abruptly. And so the spirit still recognizes itself. It's recognizing its perispirit as being its body. And so this is why suffering spirits, they still think that they're alive or they're in the physical world, the physical body, but yet they're not. And so he also says this is why some suicides and other, murders, they can still feel the body. Like he gives an example, like sometimes suicides will actually feel their body decomposing, or however they committed the suicide, like drinking poison, they'll feel their throat burning over and over and over again. Or so it's this attachment to the sensory. And I know Charles has his hand up.
No, I just would like to add to what you're sharing, that there's this process of immediate disconnection, but this way. Let's say a situation where somebody has an imminent death, however, pain is not part of that process. So the spirituality has a method where they can isolate that spirit from that suffering process. However, the body will still go to the period of detachment.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take, for example, Jesus, when he discarnated, he at some point he was no longer feeling the pain of that process that he was under to. However, it was necessary to have some time for that discontinuation to take place. So the spirituality had that ability to help us that way. That's all I wanted to share.
Thank you. Okay, so I want to turn our attention for just a couple of slides here to Teresina Oliveira in the book Initiation into Spiritism. So most of the information that she presents is from the Gospel and the Spirits book. It's from the codification books, although she does bring in some other authors like Delaney. I'm not thinking of his whole name right now, but she reads some different authors and also presents them in her chapters. And so the first thing she tells us is, yes, so remember, it's the spirit, the perispirit disengaging from the body, because the perispirit is that semi-material substance that connects the body and the spirit. So it's that intermediary, it's the bridge. She also reminds us that it's gradual, and then she gives us some new information that it occurs from the toes to the head. She talks about it being two significant pieces in this process, and one is the material, the physical. So we're looking at the status of the body at death. And then she also talks about the spiritual. So this has to do with the discarnating spirit's degree of evolution. So if we go back to the physical body, so what we see is in if a person is dying, if their body is, it's, you know, the organs are giving out, it's old age, we say, or natural death. She's, you know, she brings this information together and it looks like it's an easier transition. There's a shorter fusion stage. And I don't want to go into this too much because this is the next questions coming up. And so someone will be presenting on this next at the end of the month, talking about this, the confusion stage in death. She does say that it's shorter. It is really a normal process, this confusion stage, except for spirits who are highly elevated or purified, because they pretty much just like wake up from like a sleep. They regain their consciousness and self-awareness. And most likely because they probably had more so when they were walking on the earth. So typically this stage can be easier because it's a more natural process. The organs give out and there can be less confusion. But I had to look at that because I think, if someone had lived very materially, and so what that they're dying at 110, it's still, they still could have some suffering and be very attached to the material. So these are just very generalized. And then there's the idea of when people die after a prolonged illness. And she reminds us that this can be a time to help that person to psychologically prepare. So maybe it is the time that they come to start to look at their spiritual life, or, kind of starting to take a review already of their own life, their memoirs, how they had lived. So it gives, she also says perceptions transcend the body. And I don't think this is limited to just this stage, but it's the idea that they're starting to live in the two worlds. So there is the phenomena of seeing people on the other side of the veil. They're already starting to see maybe some of their relatives that have died before them. But I don't think it's limited to just this prolonged illness. I think this happens with all deaths, or can. And the medical system, our current medical system, I think hospice is being more open and understanding this as a phenomena and respecting it. Some people can still allude to it as being hallucinations. So then when we talk about a sudden violent death, and so we can see the accidents, suicides, disasters, murders, etc. And this is an abrupt untying of bonds. And what we need to understand is when this can be, really abrupt, violent, this can be a cause for great suffering, because also not only being abrupt, but we can have more confusion. And so this leads to suffering, more feelings of anxiety, anguish, confusion. What's happening to me? I don't understand this process. And I think most of us know that from other studies. So from a spiritual point of view, she says more spiritualized. So what does that mean? Well, that means you lived more by the spirit than the material. She says there will be an easier disengagement. The confusion state is shorter, so therefore less suffering. And she says that disengagement begins even before death. So already that process has started, because one is not attached to the physical body and realizes that death is a process of life, reincarnation. And she says the opposite is the more material, the more attached to our physical senses, the harder and longer the disengagement. The confusion state can be much longer, therefore we can experience much more suffering. So Teresina Oliveira also brings to light how the doctrine and practice of Spiritism can be helpful in this process of separating the spirit from the body. Why? Because we understand the death process. When we understand something, it has reason and meaning, and we can follow it, it becomes less fearful, less unknown. She says, possibly assisting the death process, where we're assisting the spirits that are helping us to discarnate, that we're a part of that process, perhaps keeping our thoughts elevated or following their directions and guidance, letting go of, our attachments to the material. And I was thinking that, in some of the Andre Louise books, they talk about like the reincarnation department. And so why couldn't there be a discarnation department where perhaps maybe we on the other side, we can work in this department and help other spirits to discarnate? But not only that, by understanding the process, we can kind of be a part of the solution instead of making things worse with fear and anxiety and clinging on to the earth or the body. So she says, in having spiritist knowledge, we lessen the confusion state. So this is very helpful. But I think the most important thing, and why I wanted to include this, some of her understanding and her, the way she presents it in her book, is she tells us that if you want to have a peaceful awakening on the spiritual plane, practice of the good and a clear conscience does equal peaceful awakening on the spiritual plane, which I think makes sense. We can reason and put that together. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the Spirits book. So is there a well-defined dividing line between life and death? What do y'all think? So, what was that, Mark?
Depends.
It depends. Okay, good answer. And it often does. But they say these two states touch and blend. So the two states, life and death, they touch and blend with each other. This way, the spirit disengages itself by little from its bonds. They unravel, they do not break. So I think we can see this in terms of natural death, and also to, take into consideration the speed of this unraveling. So when we're really materially connected, it's going to be a tougher unraveling versus when we're already, considering our spiritual, our spiritual selves, ourselves as spirit, and the life that is beyond the illusionary world, so to speak. All right, so 156. Can the final and I have to say, this one gave me pause. So I want to hear what you guys have to say about it. Can the final separation between soul, spirit, and body occur before the complete cessation of organic life? Yes, no, or maybe?
Yes.
Oh, wow, you guys are, didn't give you guys pause. You were right away. So sometimes in the death throes, the soul has already left the body, which has nothing left in it except organic life. The individual no longer has any self-awareness, and yet a faint breath of life still remains. The body is a machine that is kept going by the heart, and it continues to live as long as the heart circulates blood in the veins. And for that, it does not need the soul. And I guess I'll just share why this gave me pause, because so many places they ask the question, when does death occur? And they say that, when the organs give out, cessation of the body. So this is making it sound like, no, the body can still be, quote, living, pumping blood, and the soul has totally discarnated. I don't know, that seemed like new information for me. So
I think
I'm
it's a
glad-
matter of semantics. It's a matter of semantics on that explanation. Because once the death occur, the spirit has ceased its mission and all that. So there's a death. However, the physical body may still manifest remnants of life.
yeah.
That's all. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And that's what they're saying. But I guess I had never, just like you said, I hadn't looked at it from a different viewpoint. So
Right.
that was the one that I was like, that was a little bit new, but fair enough. Open my mind, keep my mind open. All right. So
I think just like you, Teresa, just so you know, if as wow, this is interesting because right, like when we think about that, there's something making the organs to function, and what is that? So I think it's interesting. I agree with you. It made me keep thinking, and of course that like I read this book a couple of times, and it always sounds like new, right? It sounds like
where'd these new questions come from?
That's
yeah.
why that's why science can utilize body donation, organ donations, because there's still vitality in those organs that can be transferred to another body.
Mhm.
The brain activity that determines, the likelihood or the cause of death. When the brain starts registering any sensations at all, sound, sight, scent, touch, when the brain does not respond or react to that anymore,
Well,
the organs are then available for transplant. If
yeah, Mark, in their near-death experiences, there has been found people that had no brain signal and they still came back.
I know.
So,
And it's usually because they're going after one of those organs, and that's what triggers the coming back.
Yeah.
right.
And I think that this is interesting from a scientific point of view, but from a spiritual point of view, I think that one of the things that I'm just thinking is that maybe what we will really seize the connection is the vital fluid. And I think that if I'm wrong, I think that I read that on the Genesis. So maybe the vital fluid is what really connects the attached, and this is what creates the silver line. The silver line that connects one to another. And I do remember having a beautiful experiences where I saw where I was participating from a student point of view in the spiritual life. I was participating in the discarnation of two people, and one of them here at BSH and the other one outside. And I saw the silver line. So this connects really well to that, and it's beautiful to see.
So for the record, please wait 3 days for me, okay?
As of lately, I've been studying biogeometry by Dr. Ibrahim Karim. And he points out, and I thought that was interesting, it kind of may pertain to this question, to what we're talking about. He pointed out that we don't have control over the function of our organs. Yes, our mind and emotions have an impact, but it's running by itself. And that's what this question is pointing to. And that means it's somehow the God energy, whatever the word is, how we want to describe it, that is actually connected to our organs. And it's not we who control it. And so it makes total sense that the body may still be running and our spirit is already detached.
Yeah. I was thinking, thanks for bringing that up, Sunshine, because I thought about that too. I know he also places emphasis on the body and the senses are already working before the spirit arrives. And it always kind of threw me because it seemed a little bit slanted from spiritism, but it's interesting because I think it's just, we just need to piece it all together. I think it all probably does come together nicely. And there's just these little details that maybe we've got to line up, but thank you for sharing that. Okay, so 157. At the moment of death, does the soul sometimes experience a yearning or an ecstasy entailing a foreglimpse of the world it is about to re-enter? So does it get excited about, oh, I'm back, I'm going back to the spiritual realm? What do you think?
We go by the
Sometimes.
NDEs. Yeah, if you go by
Yeah.
the NDEs, they're pretty consistent that, yeah, they're aware.
The soul often feels that the bonds holding it to the body are loosening, and consequently, it employs all its efforts to sever them entirely. Already partially released from matter, it beholds the future unfolding before it, and it enjoys the spirit state beforehand. So I think, they do, I underlined it, but they do have it in italics in the spirit book. And I think that's important for us to remember, that this process is not idle. It requires a lot of effort from the spirit. And then it says, oh yeah, so that's the end of that one. All right. So 158. Can the example of the caterpillar, which begins by crawling on the ground, then shuts itself up in its cocoon, and apparent death to be reborn into a brilliant existence, provide us with an idea of terrestrial life, which is followed by the grave and then a new existence? What do you guys think? Sounds good to me.
No.
They say, well, it's a pale idea. The image is good, but you must not take it literally, as you often do. They have such a nice sense of humor. So, what sensation does the soul experience at the moment it realizes that it is in the spirit world? I think these are great questions Kardec asked, because it's like, yeah, I want to know. I'm sure I've done it 100,000s of times, but without the memory.
Shock and awe.
It says, that depends. The famous answer. If it has done evil for the love of it, the spirit is at first ashamed of what it has done. However, it experiences something completely different if it has been morally upright. It feels relieved of a great weight because it does not fear the most scrutinizing glance. I thought that was very interesting how they worded that. And again, this goes back to what Teresina Oliveira reminded us, the clear conscience. So lest we suffer, the clearer our conscience. And I also thought about that Portuguese word melindre, and I thought about that when we're so overly sensitive and everything's about us, and I'm a victim and everything's personalized. Where is that coming from? Pride and selfishness. It may come out as, oh, poor me, but it's still coming from these vices. So I don't know, I've read this question before, but it definitely had a new meaning for me this time. Remembering that, practicing the good and living with a clear conscience. And how do we live with a clear conscience? How do we do that? They've given us many ways, the nightly review. We can do a spot check inventory right on the spot, take a quick look at the situation wherever we find ourselves. And it's also by this study of learning, reading these books and becoming better understanding, the law of cause and effect, the law of resonance, we're attracting what we're emitting. Yeah. So what a gift we've been given for the opportunity to study Spiritism. All right, number 160. Does a spirit immediately meet those whom it knew on earth and who died before it? And we all know this answer. No. I thought you had your hands up, Charles. You're just giving a thumbs up.
No, just in
No.
agreement with what you just said.
Okay.
What a privilege to be able to study.
Yes. So the spirit's answer here, yes, depending on the affection they had for one another, they frequently come to receive the discarnating spirit as it strives to return to the spirit world, and they help free it from the bonds of matter. It also sees many whom it had lost sight of during the spirit's sojourn on earth. Additionally, the spirit sees those who are in the errant state and goes to visit those who are still incarnate. And so Kardec, in his footnotes, he just helps us to understand the what that means about the errant state. And I'm sorry. So we can see a spirit as an incarnate, connected to the body. They can be an errant spirit, which means they're disconnected from the material body, awaiting a new incarnation. And then pure, perfected spirit without need for further incarnations.
Question. I think in the case of Andre Luis, I don't remember him seeing anybody. He
Right.
spent
Thank
9
you
years
for,
in the dark.
right. Thank you for bringing that up, Pepe, because I actually had a note about that. And actually his mother was there. His mother was by his side, but he couldn't see her because the affinity and the vibrations were not matching. So he was unable to see her. And he's unable to go where she lives once he even gets to know Solar and starts getting himself squared around, because he doesn't have the level of vibration. His spirit, his peri-spirit is not able to, go to that world, or I don't know what to call it, the area, because it's not really an area, just like we know no Solar is not really, but I guess we could say an environment. Okay, so we don't want to make it like a material place because it's in the spiritual realm. But this is why he did not see his mother, who was there to receive him. But he later, if you, did you read the book? I shouldn't say, but
Many times.
as you read the series, and he has other encounters in different regions, offering assistance, he does come to meet other family members. I'll just leave it at that because I don't want to spoil the books for people. Was that what your question was pertaining to? Why didn't he?
Well, yes, I understand that there is a group in the spiritual colonies, whatever it is, that is ready to receive and is advised. Tomorrow is this person coming, or in a few days is coming, and that group is get the relatives and get everybody ready for them to wait. However, if they have to spend some time, they have to do the time in some place, they won't see anybody because they will be in that place giving the time, regardless of how good or bad they have been in life. So it could be that they stay a day, 2 days, a week, 2 months, a year, a century. The parents will be still waiting, but he won't see them until then.
Yeah, and I guess I was just taking it a little further step and saying why, because they don't have kind of the vibrational match. His mother was very elevated. And so that's why, that's part of the reason why. There may be more to it, but that's a big part of what we can understand from Spiritism, of why he could not see her. And there's many, if you read the Andre Luis books, many of these missions, some of the lower order spirits cannot see some of the instructors, even though they're both in the spiritual realm, because of the mismatch of the vibrational level. So I hope that can make some sense. But there are many of the books, so not even just the Andre Luis, but many of the other authors talk about this phenomena. And sometimes the elevated spirit can make themselves seen to that spirit. They're able to do that, but we cannot have the reverse. We cannot have the lower order type spirit pushing for the elevated spirit to see them. So it's kind of like right now. I mean, there's spirits all around us. Why don't you see them? You know, so okay, so 161. In violent or accidental death, when the organs are not yet debilitated by age or disease, so that would be natural death, does the separation of the soul and the cessation of life occur simultaneously? Yes, no, or that depends.
It depends.
Yeah.
No.
Usually so. In any case, however, the instant that separates them is very short. So remember, once I think they're going to clarify this a little bit in the next one, but once the death of the body, the spirit leaves. Now, whether if it's completely disconnected, that remains open, but the spirit starts leaving. The spirit does not stay housed in a dead body. I mean, it can still be connected, but the body is dead. So after being beheaded, for example, does an individual remain conscious for a few moments? And I think in that last one, to emphasize, it was violent or accidental death. So it's that abrupt unraveling. So after someone's beheaded, can they remain conscious for a few minutes? What do you guys think?
Yes.
Charles,
By personal experience.
you were beheaded?
Yeah.
Oof. And what do you remember?
The building's rolling. And then I realized the buildings are not rolling, it's my head.
Oh, whoa. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so they answer. They answer. Frequently, the spirit remains conscious for a few moments until the organic life is extinguished once and for all. However, many times the fear of death causes a loss of consciousness before the actual moment of execution, which that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, I'll tell you, me on a roller coaster, I feel like I probably could die before I hit the bottom, you know? So I kind of could feel and understand what they mean by this. And who knows, maybe I was beheaded too. But Kardec gives us the footnote that consciousness here is in reference to the body, not the spirit. So is there kind of that mental activity? And again, we're reminded when the organic life of the brain stops, you're going to have loss of consciousness. But let's remember that loss of consciousness does not confirm that the perispirit has completely disengaged from the body. All right. And that even if this perispirit is still engaged, it does not mean that the body is going to be resurrected. Now we know in NDEs, near-death experiences, but they are just that. They're NDEs. They're near-death experiences. So they have not completely disengaged. The perispirit is still, the silver cord has not probably totally unraveled. And I think it's just important for us to realize the power of fear, right? The fear of death can actually cause us to lose consciousness. And I'll just close by once again sharing what Teresina Oliveira reminded us, that if we want to ensure a peaceful awakening on the spiritual plane, let's practice the good and keep a clear conscience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Teresa.
Yeah.
Questions and comments?
I do
Thank you,
have a comment.
Teresa.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's a great presentation. The quiz was very good. Train us in remembering things. about a month ago, a person died in Colombia. He was a worker of a spiritist house, and he used to give presentations on the internet. Very nice person, and he died of illnesses unexpectedly, but he was sick for a while. And then about a week ago, almost a month after he passed, the director of the house, after the meeting that they had with the medium, announced that he has already reached the light. It took a month for him, and he was a great person. I remember, it took him a month. I had to think about probably a couple of years before I get there. If he, as a good person, it took a month. So it seems to be that it's not instantaneous, unless you are Chico Javier. But it may take years. In my practice, I had seen individuals. Actually, one person was decapitated, and he said, and he told me I was decapitated. And then I said, "Are you going to up?" He said, "No, I'm going to revenge my father." And then he spent 900 years revenging his father until finally he went up. That's when he met his grandfather and everybody else. So, but excellent presentation. Thank you.
No, thank you. And what I appreciated about these question and answers is it offers us an alternative, because it's not information like I was given as a child by the church, do this or you're going to burn in hell, and feeding into all this fire. This is giving us more science and saying, here's the facts, here's affinity, here's vibration, here's what happens with the spirit. And it helps us to understand by reasoning. And the last thing I wanted to add was, two other things, but one is we will remember, and I think it's The Greater World in Andre Louise, where there's the 4 people dying and the spirits are on a mission to help them in their assistance. And the one woman, actually, they talk about how the spirit instructors and the assistants, they leave the room and she actually completes her own discarnation, molecule by molecule, because she was that elevated. So, I mean, there is that possibility that it doesn't have to be suffering, I guess, is what it is, in pain. And the last thing I'll just say, I feel like this is very on point. They anticipate my mother will pass today. She's been on hospice and it's been over a week that she hasn't eaten or drank anything. So I thought, well, they know what they're doing. And so here I present today.
I'm sorry to take so much time. Yeah, Kiki has a hand up. But about 2 years ago, I was driving with my wife and my mother-in-law to my daughter's wedding. 8 hours drive. We stopped 4 hours to have breakfast. And in the meantime, my mother-in-law was in the back. And I said, "You want to switch with my wife so you can enjoy the landscape?" She said, "No, I'm busy here with my spirits." Because she knew I like spirits. So I said, "Oh, she's joking about it." And then my wife said, "Oh, are you sure? Is even your brother such and such, a brother that they don't know what happened to him?" She said, "Yeah, with him too." 20 minutes later, we stopped in the restaurant and she had a heart attack and passed away. And then we realized that she was really talking to her relatives that passed away.
For sure. Kiki, did you want to share still?
Just wanted to remind us that I think that this reminded me the importance of us being with elevated thoughts when someone passes, because that helps a lot the person who is going through that process. So it's just a reminder for us, because we never know what they are going through. So I think it's important that we, I know it's hard, but if we can, as much as possible, to send elevated vibrations, I think that's helpful.
Thank you so much. Robbie.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. It kind of goes with what we were talking about in Heaven Hell right now, the fear of death. And it just reminded me that that's something we should all be working on, throughout our lives, educating ourselves, searching about how we feel with it. Because, an end comes to all of us in this incarnation, and it's part of life. And the idea of waiting to the very end to try to resolve and to come with terms with it. I've read a lot of articles with hospice and people that wait till the very end. It's overwhelming because then you're dealing with everything all at once, and you're trying to reconcile with events you've done, maybe people you didn't reach out to. It can be a great burden at the end. So for myself, after reading those and after volunteering with hospice, I've slowly begun that process now of coming to terms with it, like we all do, studying with Spiritism, but really trying to educate myself, watching the NDEs weekly to get a reminder that this isn't forever. Reach out, make the phone calls now, the texts, let people know how you feel, because we don't know when we go. And it's something that we can really take advantage for ourselves and others to let them know how much they mean to us in our lives. So
Thank you, Robbie. That's a good reminder. And also, I believe you can find it in the Spiritist magazine, spiritismagazine.org, where Andre Louise actually gives a list of preparing for death. And it includes both the material, kind of, get that advanced directive, and then also the spiritual as well. So there's actually like a list. We can just check it off. And then Tanya was so good to remind us that, we leave the body every night, although these questions were pertaining to death, leaving the body, the spirit leaving the body in death. But we do leave the body every night, or a lot of nights. I don't know how often, but our soul does emancipate when we sleep, or it can. And we also know the NDEs, and then there's just out-of-body experiences, right? People who are in deep trance or meditation, and they're able to do that and actually see their body. But we'll just remember that these questions were referring to the spirit leaving the body in terms of death of the body. So I think next week we're going to be having our sister Sunshine, right? Speak to us on I forgot your topic. Sorry.
Let your light shine. You are the light.
Oh, look at that. What a great follow-up. So I think now we probably are ready to head into our break.
Yes. If there are no more questions, thank you again, Teresa, and thank you everyone for participating in the dialogue. I just want to close with my own 2 cents. I was my first year of Spiritism, and my mother was dying as well. And 3 days beforehand, I visited her, and she had a reference to her brothers and sisters who had all passed before her. It was the last of 7. And so I began to pray in earnest that they'd be there to welcome her when it was her time. And 2 days later, she passed. And I will tell you, I was alone in the room with her, and I had this angular look up into the corner of the room above the bed, and I could almost envision it happening, that my aunts and uncles were all there. It's just such a vivid memory for me. And, it made everything I saw in Miltalar make sense, and everything I've read since then about this moment of passing,
Yeah. So it's interesting. They say my father died at Christmas, and they say my mother has been fighting with my father all week. Andy, get over here. And so it's very interesting. She definitely, it is actually beautiful, looking in her face, and her eyes are half glazed. She's definitely between the two worlds. And, she has moments where she just gets this big smile on her face, and, she's seeing something that's making her happy, so it's so good to know Spiritism at a time like this.
Amen. Amen to that. Okay, let's take 4 minutes.